It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yourselves. Say hello so we know who you are.
Hi, I'm Els Tahura.
Hello, I'm Chad Jetner.
I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about interviews.
I just want to know.
It's a topic that never gets old, so.
It really doesn't. And I feel like we have some experts on the panel today. Because I know, Chad, you've done a ton of interviews, and Elle, you do interviews, tech interviews, and Peter does tech interviews. He interviewed me.
And me.
Yep. And
Java.
And then all of us have been consultants for a long time and
forever
have been on the other side of the table.
So Peter, what were you?
Had many.
You were saying you just want to know.
I just want to know which pizza ingredient I'm supposed to be in an interview. That's all I want to know.
I want to know if you're a tree, where you'll be in 5 years. That's my question.
I'm not sure.
A coffee table.
Peter, is that a real question that you've been asked?
I've certainly been asked that. If not the pizza topping one, some of the other miscellaneous ingredient weird things that make no sense, that are trying to get some secret information out of you, but not in the way that is straightforward and meaningful.
Yeah, or useful. Yeah.
Or useful. How do you see yourself on the team? I'm a tomato sauce. Yeah, I'm a tomato sauce on the team. What? No.
Yeah, I have had to hold back when I think they're using gimmicks, like they read a book, or it's not just a conversation about the job and about me, and it's tricks.
I don't know if it's tricks as much as they're just trying to get a sense of your personality. I mean, I didn't really ask those types of questions, but I do try to get a sense of a person's personality, and if they're going to be personality-wise fit for the team, right?
Right.
And I think
I want to try to get a person talking.
Yeah, those questions are pretty clumsy and dopey, but they do kind of almost get you there, but not effectively.
Do you ask them about grain belt with all the grain belt paraphernalia behind you, and just say, how do you feel about grain belt?
Back when I used to do interviews in person, we usually tried to schedule them towards the end of the day. And I would have a drink while I interviewed folks because, previously that was the type of gig yes, that's just kind of what we do. So I would offer folks a drink. I'm like, hey, you want one? I'm going to have one. And hopefully, if this goes well, I'll have two. But that was not necessarily a question that I would care about, how they answer it, but it was indirectly, yes, I did ask them a grain belt question.
And that would be the hardest question for me to answer, I think, especially at the start of an interview.
Really?
Yeah, I'd be like, am I supposed to have the beer? I like beer. I love beer. Beer is delicious. But is this a trick question to see if I accept a beer? Is it a trick question to see if I don't accept a beer?
I feel like it's sort of like having food tasters for the king or something. Like if my interviewer orders a drink and they drink first, then I think it's okay for me to order a drink and drink.
Exactly. If they loosen their tie, I will loosen my tie.
Exactly. Yeah, like a mirroring exercise.
Yeah. It was kind of that, right?
Right.
Regardless, I'm going to have one. And if you do or don't, I honestly don't really care. But it was a nice way to set the tone for how the interview is going to go.
And then I would be afraid what if the beer made me say something wrong? Then what? Do I blame the beer or was it me?
For sure.
Will they know this is the 6th beer I've had in the last 2 hours?
Should I have?
I
I had
have
the
one
3
more.
beers in the parking lot.
I heard someone say that they would not hire somebody that salted their food before they tasted it if they went to a lunch interview.
Wow.
Yeah,
Like,
that's ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean,
just automatically add
What
salt.
if you're
You have
eating
no
at an
idea.
Applebee's that prepares the same exact thing every
Right.
single time, and you know it needs a little salt, and then add a little bit more later after you taste it?
I question that as a litmus test. Like, yeah, there's too many variables.
I understand
Well-
the concept, but
yeah. And I don't really have any absolutes when I talk to folks.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to hire somebody that blah. I mean, I
Yep.
don't really care, honestly. I just want to make sure.
come
that-
on now. If they punch you in the interview, you probably not. That would be one of my hard, fast rules. If I get punched in the interview, I will not hire that person, even if I deserve it.
If I deserve
Well, maybe
it,
if I deserve it, but if I don't deserve it, if I'm just
Well, now
sitting
you're
there
being
having
ridiculous, Peter.
a conversation about SharePoint, nobody should punch me.
I would say that the kind of absolute that I have on my end is if the person who's being interviewed is rude, either to the receptionist if we're interviewing at an office, or if they're rude to service staff if we're doing an interview at a no, that gives me enough information to say you need to take a step back and work on respecting others.
Yeah. They're going to assume this is you presenting your best behavior.
Exactly.
So any hint at anything is a red flag. I just think about like when I would go into an interview, it's like, well, what do they really want? They want someone that can do the job that they like to work with, that's easy. You know, they don't want somebody that comes with a lot of strings attached, special instructions, demands, drama, things like that. Like that's not the first interview is not really the time to ask about, can I work from home? Can I work whenever I want? You know, I have all these restrictions, things like that. It's like, it's a courtship, and that's a first date.
yeah, I don't mind being asked like, what's the office environment like, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's
Yeah,
actually
like
great
to work
totally.
here.
Yeah.
that I enjoy. You know, like folks that actually ask that and get us to talk about ourselves is that's huge for me. And that's actually one of my biggest
Yes.
things when towards the end of an interview, like I'll always ask like, hey, do you have any questions for me? And if I did
100%,
have an
yeah.
absolute, it's the folks that say no
Yeah.
that I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
odd, but
Yep.
My first question is, do you like working here? Do you guys like to work here? Is this a good place to work?
No,
Just
it's a
flat
coal.
out.
It's a coal mine with no good benefits. Nothing good.
Well, like I can tell if
Save us.
they're if they're lying to me. I'll know. I'll be able to tell. Yeah,
So-
it's great. We love working here. It's the best.
So are there other things, Chad? I'm curious, when you have been not the interviewer, the interviewee, and something like the interviewer wasn't necessarily doing a great job, or the conversation didn't go well. Have you learned or pulled anything from your own experiences as an interviewee to be a better interviewer next time?
I don't know, because I'm a delight to interview. So it's hard for me to say specifically, like, as a person being interviewed, I just try to, like, I'm super, super relaxed usually during an interview. I'm never really that stressed about, well, I hope I get this, or whatever. I know if the person interviewing me is good at all, then they will offer me the job because, again, I am terrific.
You're the perfect fit for every job.
Yeah, I'm pretty much, yeah. But
And modest.
I don't know that I've learned anything specific except for me, I'm always at my best when I'm like just super relaxed as an interviewee,
Yeah.
right? And so I get there by myself anyway. but I try to do my darndest to make sure that if I'm talking to somebody, whatever I can do to make them comfortable during the interview, like
Yeah.
Making sure that the environment that you're interviewing somebody in is like a place.
Setting them up for success, hopefully.
Yeah. So I make darn sure that, hey, do you want a grain belt? Do you want this? Do you want that? Like whatever it takes to get you comfortable before we start talking, start there. And then, we'll have conversations about the rest of it. The rest of the interview starts comfortable and then hopefully gets a little fun.
I learned by doing interviews, I kind of learned how people come across in the interview, and what kind of made me question if I wanted to work with them or not. How little some things on the resume mattered to me versus just how they were in the interview. And I had a choice between a certified in NT server, blah blah blah, and a bartender, and I picked the bartender because they worked with people every day.
Were you hiring for a bartending position?
No, tech support.
Oh, okay.
But they had to deal with
go,
people.
Yeah. They had to work with everybody in the company.
And I assume they had some skills that they brought to the position also, that they weren't strictly a bartender.
Do you what do you do in your free time? Do you play games? I build computers. A lot of that kind of stuff. Like, is it an interest of yours?
Right.
Is this more than just, a job you think you can do? Are you really interested in this?
I think it depends on the level at which you're bringing somebody in, right? Because for somebody I'm pretty okay at interviewing younger folks, right? Like where this is their first gig, right?
Yeah.
Like where they're fresh out of either college or a boot camp or whatever. I ask those folks different questions than I would like talking to somebody that's got 10, 15 years experience under their belt. Like a completely different, usually a pretty different interview between the two. After 15, 20 years, I'm not going to care if the guy is passionate about software development. I would be surprised if he still is.
We've talked to you, Chad, and we know we know that you may have dimmed a bit of passion in your experience.
Yes, the light does not shine as brightly as it used to. But I mean, not that it would necessarily disqualify somebody with that amount of experience.
Right.
But I mean, I'd be surprised, if you're still 15, 20 years in, just super gung ho about, learning every single interface, every single library.
Right. Have you seen the latest update to Java? Have you really played with the new feature of this one thing?
Yeah.
It's the coolest. Okay.
Right. So for senior fellas, I do usually ask just a couple of simple Java questions, right? Like really simple that if they don't know the answer, then we'll dig into that. But I don't, necessarily care. I care more about if you come in with a resume that's 10 to 15 years of experience long, we'll just point at a project and hey, what'd you do here? What was the challenges? Was it just kind of another cookie cutter Spring Boots, Java web app that everybody's kind of bored of doing now? Or was there anything actually interesting about it? And let's talk about that. And then talk about, if it's a fellow that had any influence in the direction of a project, talk about, well, why'd you pick this? Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you have done this? What precluded this from being, that's where I like to go with guys that have done this for a while. I don't know. What do you do something like that, Peter, when you interview?
Yeah, I have given up on asking any real technical, what are the three things of object-oriented programming or anything.
What's the difference between an interface and a class?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody cares.
But you have like a few like shibboleths. Like if they can't answer this one thing, that's bad. They should know at least this. You don't have anything like that?
I don't. I talk about their story starting from today and working backwards in time, and I want to hear about the projects and what they did on the project. I can tell if they QA'd the project or if they developed the code for the project and understand that this web service is talking to this backend, is talking to this, and oh yeah, we had some trouble with SQL Server over here. Oh yeah, we had some issues getting this going with this web server. Tell me the details. If you can't tell me the details, I know that you didn't really understand what you were doing or do what you were saying, right? And that comes from experience. That was not the questions that I asked in my first technical interview that I gave to someone at all. That wasn't
that
even
the clock
close.
problem?
No, the clock problem came about quite a ways off. And honestly, I've gotten away from that too, well, especially with remote interviews. But at some gig a while ago, we switched to just FizzBuzz, right? Simple, looping, go through, if it's divisible by 3, do fizz. If it's divisible by 5, do buzz. If it's divisible by both, FizzBuzz. And a senior person will look at me and like, okay, if you can't do that, that communicates quite a bit to me. If you stumble through it and make some mistakes, that's fine. If you don't even know how to start, that tells a lot. If you forget things, there's so much that can be described in that simple loop pattern that, anybody with more than
fail right there, because I would say, what's FizzBuzz? I've never heard of FizzBuzz before.
No, but
not necessarily.
But I wouldn't ask you that. I would ask you something more simple about creating a document collection or something that's really straightforward in your tool of choice. And same with like a data developer. I don't even know, Elle, if I asked you the clock problem or anything at that point, but
no, but I think getting at what you were describing, it was, you were asking me, okay, let's talk about the projects you've done. And within those stories, you pick up like, okay, this person did the actual work as opposed to this person managed the people who did the work. Or
absolutely.
You can pick up from there. I will say, I want to follow up with you, Kyle. In my opinion, there's really only one way to fail the FizzBuzz or other like type problems, and that's just saying, "Yeah, I don't know," and that's it.
I don't know, or I'm not gonna. That's beneath me to even.
Sure, yeah, that's totally true. Because you can, there are the people who can answer it right away. Like here, I'll code it up or mock code it, and which is great because that tells us they know the basics. There are other people who may not be able to solve the problem, but that is such a good opportunity just to keep talking. How would you solve the problem? If you got something like this at work, who would you talk to? What would you look at? How would you practice? If the way you talk about how you would solve a problem can be just as, if not more important than the actual solution, because then we get insight into, do you collaborate with others? Are you willing to learn new things? Are you persistent?
So my first answer would be, well, I don't know what FizzBuzz is. So that's the first thing I would do is ask what it is.
Yeah.
And then I would ask who I can ask for help.
Yeah. And obviously Googling the answer is certainly straightforward and easy, but I just want somebody to walk through it. And it's stupid simple.
Is it spelled with a Z or an S?
It's fizz and buzz. So
FizzBuzz.
FizzBuzz.
Yes.
Yeah,
not
two Z's each.
Okay.
Kyle shortened it to something that's not Googleable, but it's
I just
FizzBuzz.
steered
right?
everybody wrong.
Fizz and Buzz, and then
It's Fitzbuzz.
FizzBuzz. Put the two words together for if it matches both. And it's stupid simple, but it's stupid revealing. It's probably as revealing, Chad, as your simple Java questions are, right? Like those are things that anybody that's done Java should know what they are, right?
Yeah, and I usually ask those almost as throwaways, like because it
Right.
should take you 15 seconds, and then
It should be nothing, right?
yeah. And if you got it,
shouldn't
I'm
get
like,
stuck
all right,
on
cool,
that.
cool. Yeah, let's talk about like all of what's on your resume, and then we'll get to other things.
Right.
Another thing that I've done before, this is a previous gig, I would actually draw my architecture on a whiteboard, right, and just say, okay, what do you think is going on here, right? And I would intentionally leave off a few things, right? Like I would leave off our messaging platform. I would leave off our a couple of processes that would update like a solar index or something like that, right? So we would go through and say, okay, here's kind of our architecture. Let's walk through what you think is happening here. And we actually got like, there's a couple of guys that saw that and really, really got it, like really like nailed it. Like, oh, you don't have any messaging here. Like, how is this guy knowing about this?
Yep.
Or you don't have any process to keep this up to date. And I said, oh, okay, start drawing that on the board. And what do we think that looks like? And there's one guy that actually drew it so well on the board, we implemented his pattern instead of what we were doing. Like,
Awesome.
I said, hey, here's your first, now do that. And so it's really just like literally anything I can do to get them talking about, what they do.
Yeah.
And we went through that exercise because, just talking through things didn't seem to be going anywhere with a couple of folks. And so I started drawing on the board and said, all right, what do you think is going on here? Can you take a marker and, start connecting things here and talk about what those connections might be? That was pretty effective. With newer folks, though, Peter or Al, do you guys have like a pattern for like, okay, so this guy's right out of a coding boot camp or right out of college? Like, how do you talk to that guy?
I'll let you take this one now first.
I will generally kind of ask them. I'll try to probably get faster at, okay, why are you looking at this job in this field? What is it about this work that excites you, so that I get a sense of, okay, we can get retention potentially out of this candidate. We'll get passion out of this candidate. So just focusing on, okay, why is today special out of all other days? What brings you here today? And from there, I listen for what is really grabbing them, and then try to move that towards, here's an example of something, here's of a problem that you might be asked to solve. Talk me through how you might solve it. Not necessarily to give me the answer, but just how willing are you to keep trying if something isn't working? How willing are you to learn from others if you don't have all the answers? How do you collaborate with a team? So basically just getting a sense of their personality and how coachable, mentorable, buildable they are. I think to Peter's and Chad, your points that, yeah, I'll throw in some probably more specific technical questions like, okay, what's the difference between an inner join and a full outer join? Why shouldn't I use a full outer join on every query I create?
I have no idea, but all the DBAs tell me that, so I don't.
See, and that's like, okay, cool. When was it that the DBAs like, tell me more about that situation? How did you interact with the DBAs? How do you make sure that your queries are good? Like, do you run them past the DBA team? So yeah, just I find with more junior folks, you tend to have more questions because they might not be as used to full conversation storytelling interview. But ultimately, I'm still trying to get at the same information that I would glean from someone who is a better storyteller.
Right.
Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, and I haven't interviewed somebody at that level in a really long time. It's been a while since I've done a super junior, no experience, fresh out of boot camp kind of interview. And I would probably go a little bit more technical, but also ask about what they did in their boot camp and how they learned and yeah, how did they come to be at the boot camp or why did they choose programming as a career path in college or whatever, or the boot camps, or even just pick it up on the street, right? Like there's certainly been those people too that have picked it up on the street.
Yeah, or career change folks. Love interviewing career change folks, because then it's just what made you do a hard left turn into this realm? Like,
well,
there was a lot of effort.
There was that one day at school where the class was a little bit rowdy, and
see, that's because you're a career change person.
Yeah.
L, that might be kind of why that stands out.
Yeah.
But anything that makes the person interesting to me,
totally,
and want to know more, is a good thing. I had the unfortunate situation where the thing that the person was going to be doing that we were hiring for hadn't been around that long. And no one really knew how to do all of it.
Right.
And, there was, I had some interviews where it's like, okay, I know what you're hiring for, but what you're asking for isn't that. Like, I know what you need, but you don't know what you need. So this,
as an interviewee trying to then steer the interview.
Yeah, I don't need 5 years of .NET development experience to be a master configurator of SharePoint from the front end.
Boy, I'll say.
In fact, if you are a developer with all that experience, you're probably not going to be as good at it as I am.
Just going to be angry the whole entire time.
Yes.
I could have coded this better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where I've figured out all the ways of getting something to work that doesn't work as well as desired or as advertised. I know all the tricks from the front end, but I'm not going to go build a server side, app or anything for this that ties into it, a solution. But and when I was doing tech interviews for people that were going to do that kind of work, I had a few questions I would ask, because there was a lot of people that, well, at my last company, I did some of this, and that's why I think I can work here now and do 10 times more than that.
Right.
It's like, well, you don't really, what you did not give you nearly the experience you think it did. So there was a lot of filtering. So I think the field, there's a lot of differences depending on what you're interviewing for and the level of experience that's required. I worked on a project where I was part of the interview process for the person that was going to be taking what I was doing and moving it forward. And that was interesting because what they thought they needed was not what they needed. So there was, we had a candidate that was perfect, and it was like, then I had to sell the candidate to them. And she worked out fantastic, but it's like, So I think as a, when you're in tech, you might be you might be interviewed by people that don't really know
all the time.
like what you should know or what the project entails or what your skills should be. I found myself coaching the interviewers on what they should ask the next people for that position at the end of one of them. And I got a call 15 minutes later saying I got the gig. So I think that was a gamble, though.
Do you ever do that the opposite way in terms of like you're interviewing somebody, they're not a good fit for the job, they're not ready for it, whatever the reason is, do you give them feedback during the interview about that?
I think that I think it'd be good to do that. I would hope that if they're obviously not qualified, like really, they're gonna they're setting themselves up for failure if they keep trying, because they might get hired to do that job somewhere, and then they're not going to be able to do it. So, but I don't know. I don't want to discourage people, or and sometimes you got a lot going on. You don't have a lot of time, and you kind of just get through it. But if you can send someone away with some parting nuggets of wisdom, I think that's cool.
I've done it after the fact. Like if somebody reaches out after the fact and asks, I'll absolutely tell them, like, okay. Yeah. So recently I had to pull in three new people for a thing, right? And we got a candidate pool of like 10. It's really nice. But turns out, half of them all came from the same boot camp. So the boot camp graduation is blah. We happen to get on the right side of that and got, maybe half dozen resumes from this boot camp, which is a weird thing in our market to see.
Right.
But a couple of them were like, hey, you brought this guy on, but do you have any advice for how I could have done that differently? And I'm like, well, yeah. So I'll tell, not during the interview, right? Like one of the things that I try to do during an interview, like I said earlier, make them feel comfortable, but also make them feel confident, right? Like,
yeah,
maybe not necessarily fake enthusiasm for what they did, but like, as they're describing a pattern or describing an answer, they're like, that's awesome. That's really cool. Now let's go way deeper into that and figure out like what's really going on with newer folks. The one problem, I'm not a huge problem guy, but the only problem I give like brand new folks out of boot camp is, hey, let's design a blog, right? Like a blog application, because that's such an easy thing for people to understand. Yeah. It's a web application that has a database and a UI and maybe a service layer. Who knows, right?
Right.
If it has a service layer, maybe they're over-engineering something, or maybe they've got huge ideas. And then we talk about, okay, well, what happens if you get really popular? What do you think you should do then, right? So we get into the scalability side of things, and then we get into performance troubleshooting, which is like the stuff that, the generalized skill sets that you don't necessarily learn as you're learning Node or .NET or whatever, right? But if you can think about that stuff and talk about it a little bit generally, you've probably got somebody on the other end that's pretty decent, especially new in their career. So I was going to ask, is there any one question that you guys always ask during an interview? Like just one thing that's not necessarily tech related. I've got one, but I'll wait for your answers first.
I have, how would your coworkers describe you to me? Because that gives people the license to kind of step out of themselves and think about how they come across to others. And so then they're thinking about, how do I interact with other people? What's the feedback that I've gotten from other people about, hey, you're really good at fill in the blank. So I like asking that.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I would fail miserably answering that. I would have to sit for 5 minutes and think, how do people describe me? well, these people see me this way, these people see me that way. I don't know that I have like, I don't know that I have a specific question that I ask. I might have one, but I tend to go through the interviews all in sort of the same way and talk about the, really just get that story and then answer questions and, and, we talked about like, do you let somebody know that they failed the interview or what have you? And I tend not to do that because I don't like delivering bad news, and that's unfortunately we've got recruiters for that. But
It's so
I will
cool
definitely.
though when somebody like will tell you, you're waiting for the call, you're waiting to know. It's really cool when they actually will let you know some way
I
that you
will give
didn't
all
get
the
the gig.
feedback to the recruiter, and I will give all tell them this, tell them that, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to contact them anyway to proceed with the interview, just to go, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah.
But the other thing that one thing that I've done, and it was just happenstance that it happened. I was doing a tech interview with another SDG employee, and we were interviewing someone, and they were telling that person, would ask questions about SDG, and they were giving them like, oh man, this is the best, this is the coolest, this is so awesome. And then, at the end, I'm like, so thumbs up, thumbs down? Oh, thumbs down for sure. Yeah, they did not do well in this. I'm like, perhaps you shouldn't sell the thing that they can't have if they can't have it. So, I might talk about the project that if I'm doing an interview for a client, I'll talk about the project in general terms and things like that. And maybe in more detail to someone that I really want to get interested in the project and so that they have a desire to come on board. Right. But I don't oversell to someone that I've already sort of made my decision, like, they're probably a no or a maybe, and they're going to go on to the next step of the interview and get hit with hard questions. And so, I've been in that situation where you're like, either feel like you've got the gig already sewn up and then you didn't get it, or most of the time it's, I did not get that gig. And then, oh, I start Monday. Okay. Well, that's going to be interesting.
Oh, darn. Yeah, I got the job.
I didn't think, wow. Okay.
I don't have a specific question necessarily. It depends on, is it, full-time gig or was it for a project? Because I've interviewed consultants for projects when I was a full-time employee at a company, and then it's interviewing for full-time people. The one question is, why are they leaving what they're doing? Why are they here in the room? Is it growth opportunity? And on the other side of that question, there should be a positive reason. That's not the moment to complain about it, but you can be somewhat honest. What I want out of my career, I realized wasn't going to happen there. So, but I think it's going to happen here. I really wanted to do this, and I couldn't do that there. There's I want to know what you can do, like your competency level, and what you've done, the stories of your projects, tales of your deeds.
Right.
It's time to not brag necessarily, but it's time to tell your stories in that situation. And, what do you like to do? What are your passions? What are your interests? That kind of stuff. And because that will tell me if that's related to what they're doing. Why do you want to work here? I think is a good one. Mostly it's, I need a job and I want to do what you're hiring for.
I never ask, why do you want to work here? Because usually it's,
I know though.
we're looking for a person that does what I do.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to, do that. And if it's somewhere else, cool. If it's whatever. I like to ask folks, especially if it's somebody that's been doing this for 5 or more years, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done as an IT person, right? Like, what's your
so
biggest, like,
many.
tell me about your biggest mistake. And then I lead it with mine, right? When I misconfigured a database replication and wiped out a production database, and
Oops.
you know what we did after that. But it's a great question, I think,
Totally.
because it gets them. I mean, it's not a question you usually get asked in an interview, I think.
Right.
And like, their propensity to screw up and is probably directly proportional to your propensity to do great things. And then the follow-ups are always great. Oh, okay. Well, then how did you, like, what did you do after that? And how did you make sure it doesn't happen again? And, like, what was the fallout of the situation? Is that situation why you're talking to me right now? Like, did you get fired because of that? It's a really cool question. And it really does get people, even like, some of the folks that, if you don't have somebody opening up to you for whatever reason, that's a nice icebreaker, right? And it's not one of the, why'd you leave your last gig? Why do you want to work here? Like, what's special about, I kind of avoid those because they're overly, I don't know, not vague, but like, there's no answer that I would care about.
No, that's stuff I want to know. That's not stuff I'm necessarily going to ask. I want to fish it out of them. But like that question of asking about, things you screwed up, like knowing how they handle like an adverse situation, how they recover, if they take risks. I think that's all fantastic stuff to know about somebody. Like, did you feel bad about it? Like, if they didn't, well, you should have, like, a little bit,
I don't care.
That was fine. I just wiped out all these things, and it didn't matter. It's like,
Chad, you had
am I
to
hiring
feel,
a psychopath? Is that
Chad,
what's
you had to
happening
feel
here?
bad for a little bit when you knew how much work you were going to have to do.
I mean, it was, I was, upset, but did I feel emotionally distraught?
No.
Yeah.
I will say I generally, like, I'm with you, Chad. I almost completely agree with the why are you here? Why did you leave? Like, that's not deterministic necessarily of like, okay, are you a good or bad candidate? The one exception I would have for that is when I'm trying to get a sense I'm interviewing somebody to come here work at SDG. I want to get a sense of why are they looking at consulting, simply because you're not staying at one place forever. You're going to different clients. And are you okay with onboarding potentially multiple times a year at different companies?
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And hopefully, if they haven't done consulting, they ask you about consulting.
Yes.
Like, what's consulting like? How is that? And, hopefully you've made the decision that this is a person we want to bring on board, and I'm going to explain both the positives and the negatives that I find with consulting and let them help that inform their decision about, well, it's better to have them turn down the position because they don't want to onboard more than once a year than it is to onboard them once, have them onboard at one place, and then quit because they didn't want to onboard again. Right.
You try to figure out if they really know what they're getting into.
What are the things that you think people stress out about that you really don't care about when it comes to interviewing with people? Like, for me, this is silly and maybe not applicable to consulting, but for me, general appearance, like, I don't really care, right? Like, previous to this, in a small company, as long as you don't smell bad, I don't care anything about like your outfit or your clothes or if your shoes are polished. One kid came in with a sport coat that still had the tag on it. I actually respected that.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God. That's because it was in his sleeve and it fell out halfway through the interview. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, don't be, man. Like, if you're never going to wear a sport coat before, that's great problem solving. Like, keep the tag on.
I would question, like, are you planning to take it back, or did you just forget to take the tag off?
I wouldn't even care. I'd be like, you put in effort to get a sport coat to come to this place. That's effort equals achievement, right?
It depends on the gig, like what they're, if it's a developer, like there's different roles where you kind of want a mad scientist. And if their hair's all messy and they're not wearing a collared shirt and they're in jeans, but man, did they know their stuff? Like then it's like, because I can, if I hire that person, I can ask them to like comb their hair if I need to, but I don't really care about that stuff.
What are the other things that we really don't care about that we do think people stress out about, though? Like, for me, the appearance is a thing. I can't think of another one, though, that I think going into an interview that people do care about. That
I will tell you the thing that I do care about that some people don't care about, just being on time or being sort of communicative about what's going on and why you're going to be 20 minutes late to something that's been on the calendar for a week. I'm okay if you're going to, I've done tech interviews hour after they were because they had the wrong time zone configured in their whatever. That was the excuse that they gave. I gave them benefit of the doubt. We did the full interview, and I don't remember how it went from there. But honestly, I don't. It's like maybe they were hired, maybe they weren't. But, if you're going to be 20 minutes late and you're just keeping that information to yourself because you're lost or whatever, just call, email, text, whatever.
I would say that the thinking you need to have an answer for every single question.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Instead of,
I don't know is a valid answer.
I don't know, but I could find out.
Right.
And here's how I would find out.
You better follow up.
I've never done that before, so I would have to learn how to do that. I don't, but I can learn how to do things.
Right. Yeah, you have to follow up. I don't know with something.
Yeah. You do. Yeah.
Can't just be, I don't know. Yeah. Move on to the next question, please.
Just make a face, shake my head, and hope they move on.
Yeah, and I think it's key for the interview candidates too to remember that if you're in an interview and like you're asked very specific, like which one is better, a bubble sort or a merge sort, and there is a right answer, like that's more about the interviewer needing to puff up their own ego than you as a candidate.
Right.
Well, and once in a while when you're interviewing for a job, you might not get that job, but you might get a different job that they're hiring for.
True.
Like I came in for the sysadmin job, but I was hired for the tech support job. Like
for the assistant to the sysadmin job?
Right. Like I wasn't quite qualified, but what you are qualified for is this other thing. So would you be interested in that? And yes, because right now I'm waiting tables. So absolutely would be interested in doing that.
Right.
Curiosity is, in my book, is huge. Like if somebody's curious about things, I think that's a great quality. I look for that. I think,
but those are more icing things rather than things.
Yeah. In terms of like misconceptions or things, like I wouldn't worry about doing the 25 things that an article says you need to do before an interview. Like some of them are pretty intensive, like study the company and know everything about study the people that are going to be interviewing you. And
Right.
um,
Please
yeah.
don't look for me on LinkedIn before my interview with you. It's just going to be weird.
I'm amazed that LinkedIn lets you see when people look at your thing, and that does after, yes, like that's fine. But I would, you know, at the very least, if you don't know what a company does, kind of look up and see, you know, what a
Right.
company is all about, right?
There shouldn't be that
if
many
you-
surprises in the interview.
Right,
Mm-mm.
right. Have actual good questions ready and not just general questions like, you know,
Yes.
whatever. Like I like it when folks ask me, hey, like, what's the day to day for a guy in this role? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right.
What are the other guys, you know, how do the other folks on the team get by day to day? Like, what is, you know,
Who will I be working with is when I try to ask, like, what's the team I will be joining like? You know, am I going to be shoved in a corner? Am I going to be on my own, or am I going to be with people that have been here for 25 years and I will always be the new guy? Yeah, I like to know that.
Yeah, I would say Chad, I'm kind of like you, that as long as somebody doesn't smell terrible, like, you know, come dressed in what makes you confident and comfortable, like whatever that your best self can look
Yeah.
a lot of different ways.
Just don't gross me out.
Yeah, well, but I will say I've had a number of interviews where just like somebody swallows their water wrong and starts coughing, and then they start apologizing for coughing, and like, you need to breathe. Like, we're not that's priority one. You don't need to stress out about the fact that you having a small coughing fit is going to make or break your interview.
And
It's
the other,
okay to accept a beverage and say,
Yes.
sure, I love a cup of coffee.
Yes.
That can even work in your favor. People that offer you gifts and things feel good when you accept them.
and having something to take a sip of to contemplate an answer is always good.
Yeah.
I would also say that as an interviewee, just know that everybody knows that you're going to be nervous, right? Like, and just do, you know, as much as we want to be totally relaxed, laid back, and cool about things, there's always going to be a little bit, even after, I mean, I'm even nervous to this day when I have to interview with someone. I'm not anywhere close to where I was 20 years ago, but, and especially as a consultant, it's way more relaxed. Be like, if you don't like me, that's fine. We'll find somebody else that likes me.
That is a perk. Yeah.
I would tell interviewees, one of my pet peeves is the platitudes. Like, ignore all the platitudes. Like, well, I'm really eager to learn. Yeah, man. Like, so is 10 other people that,
Right.
I mean, I've heard that 10 other times. You know,
Chad, I'm a people person.
I work hard and play hard.
Exactly. Like, oh my God. It's have something interesting to say about yourself
Right.
is all I ask of folks. Like, have a fun story, have something interesting to say, ignore the platitudes, and understand that you're, you know, depending on what you're coming in as, you're probably one of 5 people. So there has to be something, you know.
And 5 pretty close to equal people, right? A lot of times.
If I
Yeah.
had to say, my biggest flaw is that I work too hard.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, those are challenge, and you're right. They, you know,
Cringe is as
they
bad
don't
as
do anything.
gross. Yeah. You don't have to sound like too professional, like too stiff. That's what interviewing younger people that are getting into the business world, have a lot of business speak, and
Well, yeah, because they get
really
you
trying
get your
hard.
suit starched and your personality starched.
There you
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and Relax as much as you can. Be comfortable, because if there's one thing that everybody interviewing you wants is to never do another interview. They want to hire you and be done with the process so that they don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah. And then if I'm interviewing, before I leave, I always ask like next steps and how long should I wait before I stop bothering you or before I start bugging you and calling you to see if I got the job or not? Yeah.
Or I'll just say, see you Monday, right? Like, just
There you go.
assume
Yeah.
you got it.
Well, there is something to like speaking like you already got the job, like starting to ask questions about the project, and all of a sudden you're in a project meeting with them doing some planning and things like that, and you've started work and they're like, all right, we're already working with this person, let's hire them.
Very true. Very true.
Excellent. Any other parting thoughts?
Chad.
Go for Chad.
Yeah.
Have a good story about why you're better than the other 5 people, right? Like that, and that's it. Ignore platitudes. Have a good story. Don't screw up ever.
I'll go next. Be yourself, because you don't want to be hired as the person that you pretended to be. You want to be hired as yourself. And, that's going to make everybody a lot happier.
I would say, I'd say practice stories more than specific problems.
Right.
Be able to just explain how you work, how you solve problems.
Yeah.
Kyle.
Be cool. They want to work with people they like. Just be cool. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out, just keep trying. Persistence. Stick with it.
You get more practice that way.
That's right. You get better and better. All right. Awesome. Well, I think that does it. I guess all we got to do now is say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Good luck.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.